Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, anyone and everyone who's watching this video. If you know me as Cole Perch Gibson. If you don't, I am Cole Perch Gibson. I am the host of League Hour. I am a voice on the LCS Rundown, and I am an analyst slash play-by-play commentator slash color commentator slash coach, possibly in Compete League. Coming up soon. For the League Hour fans, I want to give you guys an update on what we've been doing so far since our last episode last semester, or some of you guys before summer began. In this time span, we've always kind of had a really awkward starting point because we usually start when Worlds is up, and last year we were better prepared for covering the World Championship and making sure we had news out in time for that. But then this year, we decided to do a rebrand because last year we were known as Primetime Esports. This year, we obviously rebranded to League Hour. What's going to be happening is we're going to wait basically till after Worlds is done, because not only does it fit better with our guys' schedule, but also it'll be a lot easier to cover news when we're not trying to keep up with the hot, spicy action that Worlds brings to everybody. And then once that's over, we're going to actually be getting into it hot and heavy. Let me introduce this segment to you. This is going to be hashtag Perch Rants, which basically is going to be me picking a topic in esports, whether it be a popular or unpopular opinion, and going deeper into it from my perspective of things. And we might get Mom and Annie to do their own, but it depends on their schedule and their time. This is what I'm going to be doing in the meantime while we're waiting. So I hope you enjoy. This week, we're going to be talking about a topic that I've been in heated debate with people before about, and I still stand by strongly now, is that the concept of exceptional or exceptionality by association. The example I'm going to take is from the World Championships because it's the most current example, and it's going to be Samsung Galaxy, because we know that of the three Korean teams there, they have been struggling the most in several different facets. Well, not several, I'll say a couple different facets, but they're pretty big given the meta we're in and how the game is being played right now. So let's get into it a little bit. The main topic of what I'm talking about is that, Samsung Galaxy should not, by association to Korea, be considered a top team, or at least a top 5 team at Worlds. I am really, really tired, really tired of the association that because they are a Korean team, they are top 5. And I know for the last few years that has been the assumption, and it's a right assumption too I've had, because Korea has definitely shown up more than other regions in the past 5 years, I'll even say, at Worlds, except for the year that, even then, Samsung White and Samsung Blue are both Korean teams, right? Now, I'm going to get straight into the topic, because I'm trying to keep these videos between 30 and 40 minutes, so I'm going to get straight into it. So, point numero uno is taking a little bit of context from before World started for Samsung. Now, usually when you see Korean teams come in, all three very strong. It's a very hot contested playoffs, and yes, SKT comes through, but usually the last few years, we've seen SKT in a bunch of 3-2s, 3-1s, even going through the bracket stages. Usually they're at the top, so you have to wait till the finals, but even in bracket stages, we see a lot of teams go, 3-1, 3-2, unless you have an exceptionally strong team, like, ironically, I believe Samsung was. No, I can't even say that, because Samsung had to qualify through Gauntlet last year. So I can't even say that. I was going to give them a little bit of the benefit of the doubt, but scrubbing that away, like the hopes of most North American fans, this Worlds. I'm sorry, I had to do it. The meme had to come out. You knew it was coming eventually. You knew. But anyways, back to the point at hand. Going into summer playoffs, so we saw that Samsung, they finished, I believe, 3rd or 4th in the regular season. I believe it was, I want to say 3rd, it might have been 4th. And so they received the 4th spot in the bracket stage, aka they had to battle, I believe it was either Africa or MVP first, and then they went to SKT, or no, it was vice versa, I want to say. I'm going to pull it up right here. So yeah, we saw SKT actually were the ones that had to, they had to run the gauntlet because SKT did not finish the year out well, so they had to beat Africa, then Samsung, then KT, then Longzhou. In these games, if you're watching, because I'm sure you were, able to stay up till 3 a.m. like I was, because I'm a league nut, right? If you're watching the games, or if you didn't get a chance to, I suggest you go back to watch them to get some contextual clues. In that series, obviously, SKT won. It was a 2-0. But at the heart of it, it wasn't even a close 2-0. And this is one of my main points. It wasn't like a close series where Samsung made SKT pull it out. SKT stomped them in 3 very high kill games. This is an SKT that make their living off of basically setting things up, basically setting up traps. Their lanes are all exceptionally good, and then they basically, through good jungle pressure, they set up traps for you to fall into. These are 3 very high kill games, which means that it didn't even get to that point. And usually in these games where old SKT played, it wasn't very high kill games. It was like an 8-2 game where Samsung gets 8 kills and wipes the floor of them because of gold lead objectives things. These were like 11-2, 14-6, things like that nature where SKT just steamrolled the entire game through. And for Samsung, they play a late game playstyle, which basically means that they like to wait for the mid game 20-25 minutes to actually turn their team on. And in the past, that was great because they had 3 exceptional lanes that basically could wait that out with good vision control. All 3 lanes could basically sit and wait for that moment before they made their big TP play to bot lane or wherever they decide to make the play at, neutral objective or wherever it may be. And that was fine. In playoffs, especially against SKT, we saw Crown underperform. He got shellacked by Faker in lane. Lane Kingdom, like he was tilted after the first game. If you watch the players' cams, he was tilted after the first game. Kuve was really the only highly performing player because he was the only one that didn't get subbed out for. Samsung used all of their subs in this series to try and defeat SKT because I'm pretty sure Samsung was put on the back foot. They didn't realize SKT would come out this strong, even though they should have because it's SKT. They did not do that. They got the floor wiped with them because their late game playstyle is actually, if you're a good team, easily exploitable. But then you get to Gauntlet, and people will say, oh, well, Gauntlet, they stepped it up. Surely. Not really. It was more of a Freak of Freaks. Took them to 5 games. The first 2 games, a Freak of Freaks stomped them. Just stomped hard. 14-7 was 1 kill score, I think, and then an 11-5 game where Freaka just snowballed the early game. Like, if you play against Samsung well and know their weaknesses, you will do. But then they dropped the ball. They allowed Samsung to play their game the last 3 games and just play late game scaling comps that, for whatever reason, their Freaka Freaks didn't take advantage of, and they got reverse swept. And then in the finals, like, we all know the history. I could do a literal entire video of the history of KT versus Samsung, in which all of it's the same thing. KT seems to fall apart against Samsung. So I can't even take Regional Gauntlet and say that was a real true test to say Samsung was back before this tournament. They came in with a lot of faults, but my big issue again, and the argument is, it's making me so mad, is that people are saying, oh, well, they go to Worlds, doesn't matter their past performances. They're a Korean team, they should be considered in the top 5 to possibly make a Worlds run. And obviously I highly disagree, and that's going to lead into my second point, which is the biggest reason I disagree with this is that their playstyle just doesn't fit this. I won't even say it doesn't fit the meta. The way they play their playstyle does not fit the meta right now. You can play late game scaling compositions. Sure, that's kind of what this meta is built on right now. But it also requires some sort of planning. You have to have a game plan to protect yourself to get to that late game. And that's something Samsung doesn't really do. You saw it in a lot of their games. RNG is a prime example where, and I'll just start talking about the RNG matchup. Most of the games, both games they played against RNG, the second one better than the first, but still the same result. RNG took control of the early game at some point before the 25-minute mark and was able to close the game out on that extremely quickly with a lot of power. Like, a lot. Like, I'm talking Goku Super Saiyan Uzi, and it was mainly through MLXG putting a lot of early pressure on the Samsung through the mid lane through Xiaohu, because let's remember this meta is your mid lane gets priority. Once your mid lane gets priority, junglers like MLXG are able to go in and invade and lay down deep wards and maybe get a kill on the enemy jungler. And then once they lay down those deep wards, get that priority, that allows them to push mid lane, roam to the bottom side of the map or top lane in some instances, but most of the time it's the bottom lane because of the Ardent Sensor meta. And then get your bottom lane ahead. And then once you get bottom lane ahead, take that first turret. You start snowballing because you open up lane. Just keep opening up lanes. Use a bit of lane swap, etc., etc., etc. And Samsung just doesn't do this well. They used to play it well because, like I said, they had the individual players to last this long. So Ambition, usually Crown had mid lane priority. So Ambition could go ward up for his other lanes and they'd be safe. And Ambition could farm. And everything was happy. Go lucky, oopsie daisy dandy. Until 20-25 minutes where they can make a play. But now Crown isn't performing like he used to. Not going to say he's underperforming because, they obviously made it out and he looked pretty decent doing it, but not like old Crown where it just seemed like he was unstoppable outside of Faker. Ruler and Core JJ did not look like the Ruler and Core JJ at the end of the summer split. They had inconsistencies in lane, even losing lane at time, and the only really consistent member was Kube in the top lane. But in this meta, unless the top lane is making a TP, you don't really play through, or unless he's playing a carry top laner, which no one except for Khan really is doing right now, or you play through the TP advantage, you TP to a lane and get an advantage there, you're not really playing through top lane because you're playing tanks a lot. So even Kuve can't push his advantage when he got one. I'm going to go into these RNG games a little bit more just to kind of illustrate, and I have graphics here prepared as well. That's the 11-0 game. The 11-0 game is a perfect example of what I'm talking about, right? So you see, obviously 11-0 is the big number that pops out, but look at that gold graph real quick. You see that about the 14-15 minute mark, RNG starts to carve out a pretty significant goal lead. When that one says 5,000, that means that goal lead right there is at least probably 3,000, if not getting close to that. And then it's a slow, steady climb to keep that lead until about the 24-25 minute mark, where I believe they won a team fight, got the Baron, and then ended the game soon after. And yes, SKT can do this. They can be the ones to go down 3 or 4K, but they also know how to mitigate their losses when they are losing. That's the big difference between Samsung right now and the Samsung of the past. Was even if they might have found a way to start losing the early game, they were good at mitigating their losses, making trades so that the goal lead never came out of reach. But for this Samsung, getting down 3,000-4,000 gold this early is detrimental, if not deadly, for them, because they don't really come in with a plan in the early game. It's more of, let's see what Ambition can do. I remember in G2 game, we'll get to that in a minute, he died 2-3 times in jungle trying to make plays. One time he was contesting the Gromp for however long for almost no reason. And in the rest of the lanes, yeah, Crown usually gets a safe lane, or because he's such a good player, he's able to escape it. But then their bottom lane is usually losing. You look at these CS numbers, 301 to 246. I can only imagine how high it was in lane, 604, 020. And also the Rakan not doing well at all. The bot lane or RNG stomped them. And that's what this meta is all about. At the end of the day, no matter how you get to that point, it's about snowballing your bottom lane. And you can't do that when you don't make at least some sort of proactive call to have a plan to say, hey, we're going to safely ward our lane, our bottom lane, so when we hit this minute mark, we can make a play to the bottom side. And Samsung's not doing that anymore. At least I don't see it. And a lot of analysts that were talking about them didn't see it. It just seems like, to me, they're preying on the teams they're playing either not being good enough or not having a plan to exploit them this early. And RNG definitely did that. They did in the second game as well. I don't have to pull up the second graph because it was a lot closer, but basically the Go graph said the same thing, where it was for better or worse, I believe the lowest RNG got in the second game to down was 1.1k gold. And something I say in this meta a lot to people is, if you don't have a 5k gold lead or more by the 20-minute mark, any team can come, almost any team, if they're good enough, can find a way to late game scale and come back against you. The best example of that is SKT, and even TSM did it in Group D, where eventually they just outscale because they had a bear scaling comp because the gold lead did not expand big enough. But let's move on to G2, because something else I say, and I honestly hate this argument. You know, I talk about G2, and if you follow LCS Rundown, I predicted G2 to get out instead of Samsung because of the weaknesses I'm pointing out. In G2, despite people making jokes about them usually playing for late game in the summer split because they were confused when the meta shifted after Rift Rivals, they're actually a pretty good early game team. And you saw that in the win against RNG, where they made a lot of good early game plays to snowball their lead in the bot lane and basically do exactly what RNG wanted to do, which is allow through mid lane priority, allow Perch to roam. And then when you allow Perch to roam, he goes to the bottom lane, finds an advantage, they get first towers, Finn gets rolling on the Tristana, and then after that, it's just take turret, baby, take turret. I'm explosive, I'm explosive, I'm explosive. I'm sorry. A little bit of Atlanta came out of me there. That won't happen again. It might happen again. I'm sorry. Don't judge me. Don't judge me. My argument is that I feel like if G2 played like they played in week 2, but in week 1, there's a serious argument that G2 probably makes out over SSG if G2 plays like they did in week 2, because I say that because G2 played like their old self. I feel like a lot of G2's problem, and this will be a little bit of an excerpt on G2 before I get back to the main thing, is that they overthought things and they changed up their style too much. A lot of what you saw, the success you saw from teams at World so far, is they play their own style. They didn't switch it up too much. Obviously, everyone's style is going to be somewhat meta-oriented, but they didn't change the way they played that style too much, you see misfits. That's how they got out of the groups. That's how EDG and AHQ kind of made a, or at least AHQ beat SKT, and how EDG tried to make a comeback in the group, and that's how Cloud9, at least for week 1, got to that 2-1 good start, and that's even how Fenerbahce almost beat Samsung Galaxy in the group stage, was just playing their own style and just adapting enough to, not have that style be exploited. And G2 never did that. In fact, they overthought things, I think. I think Young Buck overthought things, not only in the draft, like when you had the Ivern pick. Why would you pick Ivern? Yes, early game junglers are good, but not that early game jungler, because he's just too much of a sacrifice for a tank jungler. Yeah, you have Arden Cincer, but that's not enough of a opportunity cost to go for. And then even with their last game against Samsung, where instead of saying we're going to punish them early like we punished RNG early, and then allow that to help us scale, because one of the great things about Tristana, when you play her right, is that not only can she late game scale, at the same time, she is very good at, when you have the play set up right, pushing down that first tower, lane swapping, pushing down the side lane towers, and then giving you so much of the map to work with, to where then you can almost easily take the mid lane tower or other objectives. Because that's just how Tristana works. That's how good she is right now on this meta. But instead, they moved away from Tristana. They picked the Kog'Maw. They went for the Zac because they kind of outdrafted themselves. They ran out of steam. They picked their bomb lane first. Was like, great, cool. We got the strongest bomb lane in the game right now. But then they allowed Samsung to ban out all of Trick's comfortable junglers. Allowed Ambition to play something that was relatively comfortable. He's very good on the Kha'Zix because it has the early game pressure to allow him to farm not only his side of the jungle, but going in and farm the enemy's jungle without feeling in danger, as long as his lanes have some sort of push. He could take the Kha'Zix against the Zac, and it's just an infinitely better pick into the Zac early game. At that point, I believe Perch picked Ryze as well in that game. Perch picked the Ryze, which Ryze seems to be the kryptonite of not only NA teams but Western teams, because I don't know why they put so much priority on this pick. I can go into that a little bit later, but in the purpose of saving this, trying to keep this under 40 minutes, I won't go into. It's just a bad pick in the mid lane right now, especially when you have two losing lanes already, and an enemy team that's going to prioritize magic damage risk, because you have the Galio, who does extremely well on the AP mid laners. You have the Cho'Gath, who will outscale Maokai, and also can build some sort of magic resist naturally into his build without sacrificing anything. And then the only thing that Kha'Zix and Twitch have to sacrifice is maybe Twitch builds a Mercurial, or maybe and then Kha'Zix builds a Maw, and then you have the Locket from Lulu, and then your magic resist is secured, while you have a ton of magic damage on your end. You have 3 losing lanes. Like, the draft was just terrible for G2. And that's why they lost this game. I don't think it was anything with Samsung being better than them. I think they lost it in the draft because they overthought things. But back to the main point is that Samsung is vulnerable. Extremely vulnerable. In fact, I can name 4 teams above them, maybe even 5 above them, that puts them out of the top 5 conversation. I can list SKT, obviously. Longzhu, obviously. RNG. WE, I think, beats them. And in a perfect world where they do not collapse, EDG could probably beat them if they don't falter, but we'll never know, because EDG, once again, it's another example of if they played like they did in week 2 and week 1, they probably would be out of the group. But, close only counts in horseshoes and hand grenades, my man. But the point is, Samsung, and even against Fenerbahce, just look vulnerable in the way they play the game, because they had to employ too much strategy in covering up their inefficiencies than it is taking a proactive look at the game. Their individual laners are performing so subpar than we're used to seeing in past years, that they have to basically pick late game scaling compositions like TSM, but they just play it better than TSM, because who knows why TSM, and I'll make a video about that on another date, but they just do what TSM did but better, which is basically have a plan. Usually it's have a plan in the early game. But even then, they don't really seem like they have a plan in the early game, and they seem to have better individual play to be able to last out these games. And because G2 and Fenerbahce could not exploit this, because G2, I won't say they're the better team. I feel like at the period in time we're at right now, they were the better team. Now, in the past, Samsung during spring and summer, Samsung looks like the better team, obviously. But in this period of time, G2 look like they, if you're looking at, just on paper, and you look at past history and recent history and the types of wins and losses they're coming off of, G2 look like they could have been the stronger team, and they just faltered at the finish line. They couldn't make it to the finish line, and that happens. In Fenerbahce, they're still an emergent region team, the only emergent region team not to win a game at Worlds, and they still almost beat Samsung, if not for one last play, I believe, in Fenerbahce's Nexus. Or in Samsung Nexus, where Samsung was able to turn the game around. I guess at the end of the day, the point is that, their play style, the way they play their play style isn't fit for this meta. For their posterity's sake, because analysts said this, I think Frost Curran said on a desk after Group C concluded, which is, it's hard to deny, and even Kelsey Moser said it in a tweet, I believe, it's hard to deny that if G2 was in a different group, they'd probably make it out. Just based on their Week 2 performance alone, they could have still faltered in Week 1 and had a good Week 2 and still maybe made it out with different teams, the way they were playing. And Samsung Galaxy, whether Week 1 or Week 2, probably doesn't make it out of groups in a different group. But we'll never know. And I always have to preface this when I talk to people. I'll probably sound wrong because we'll never see a... well, actually, I'm going to say that for my third point, or my conclusive point. But we'll never see other teams outside of an LCK or LPL team, I think, play Samsung this tournament because I don't think W is going to lose to C9. And even if Samsung can somehow beat Longzhu, I don't think they can beat WE. But the point is they won't ever play a Western team or a team outside the two best regions at Worlds right now, so we'll never know. But moving on to my third point, we're kind of coming up to the end of this rant. It hasn't been as emotional as I'm going to be prone to get in the future rants, especially the one I'm going to be doing on TSM, so, wait on it. I had another Atlanta moment. Leave me alone. Leave me alone. I'm not as emotional because, it's a tough point to argue and it's an unpopular opinion, but I think it's the right opinion and it's just sort of like a thing I had to get off my chest. I was way more emotional about it. I'll probably get a little bit more emotional in this last point though, because it's more of an overarching thing. So last point is, if you look at Samsung historically, right? I'm going to compare them to Korea's history versus Samsung. Now, Korea, obviously, strong history. Like I said at the beginning, they deserve to be respected for what they've done. They've been the best region by far in League of Legends since Season 2. I wasn't here Season 1. Since Season 3, I guess. I wasn't here Season 1 or Season 2, so I don't know how they looked then. I don't even know if they were there for the World Championship in Season 1. But I know since Season 3, they've been the best team, the best region in the world. So they deserve their respect. But I'm tired of people associating the teams that are in there with the success. Like saying, oh, because Samsung is Korean, they're good, and therefore they have a bid. Stop with that baloney. It's a bunch of mess, and I don't believe it, and I don't like it at all. Because if you look at Samsung's history, they haven't even really been a part of that successive history. You look at their history, and I'm going to have a graphic for you right here. Their best history has been 2 first-place finishes, IM Guangyi, and the SK Telecom Masters 2014, all the way back in 2014, and then IM Guangyi in 2016. And then before that, it's second place at World Championship. Obviously, that's a big thing. But then after that, it's a couple second place finishes in the spring split, which everyone kind of has agreed that doesn't really matter as a split, really. And especially if you're going to get into gauntlet play, it doesn't really matter as a split. And then Rift Rivals, whoop-de-doo. And then after that, it's third place in summer split and third place in spring playoffs because they couldn't beat SKT. They ended up 13-5, which they did do better than SKT in summer split, so I guess you gotta give them props for that. But then in spring playoffs, they couldn't beat SKT. So therefore, not spring playoffs, my bad. Summer playoffs. They couldn't beat SKT. Actually, no, they got 4th in summer playoffs. I'm gonna edit that. Rerun. But yeah, and looking at the rest of their success, it's 2 second place finishes, Rift Rivals, which no one cares about, and then LCK spring split second place finish, which no one really cares about that split either. And then a third place finish in spring, a third place finish in summer split, and third place was spring playoffs, a third place finish in summer split. And then after that, it's 4th, and then everything else after that is 4th and down. And that's since the merger of Samsung White and Samsung Blue. So not counting Samsung White, Samsung Blue, just Samsung Galaxy as the merger. They didn't really get good, like exceptionally good, basically until last year when they made it to the World Championship. And that was a surprise to everybody. No one expected them to come out and do that. They're a young squad, and they just played exceptionally well. And I give them props for that. But we cannot add them to the history of Korean being good based on one performance, because in their own region, they have not been a regional powerhouse, but except for a year, like 1 or 2 years, a year and a half. So you cannot, and even in powerhouse in Korea is a strong word, because in Korea, they judge teams on, if you lose a game, that's a terrible sign. In North America, you lose one game, it's like, we come back next week. It's whatever, deal with it. But in LCK, it's like you lose a match, it's like, uh-oh. If you lose a match and you're perceived the top 5 teams, like, uh-oh. And they lost 5 of those in the summer split and ended up 3rd. So it's not like, I guess by LCK standards, they've been one of the strongest teams out there. They're definitely strong. I mean, there's definitely not a lot of parity in the LCK. I can tell you that the top 5 teams are basically the same almost every year. Give and take, the fourth and fifth team sometimes switch out, but we can't say they're one of the best teams in the world. Hey, they're one of the best teams in the world, right? So, I mean, that's my point. I mean, it's hard to judge it to the rest of the world. Historically, I just am tired of people associating teams with the success of a region. Because if that were so, then when G2 wins, EU, and they go to an international tournament and everyone hypes up EU and there's multiple EU teams there, do you hype up the rest of EU? No. And even Froscari made a great point, which is if the nameplates were taken off of off of SKT and Samsung players' names, we would be grilling them so hard on how they've been playing. But because they are Korean and they have that tag on their name, they are given the benefit of the doubt by a lot of people, and that really burns me. That burns my britches. Ha! I went country on you that time. I went country, holding a mic thing. This is my new pointer. Point. But anyways, so now that I went over that, so basically to kind of conclude this, I've hit my 30-minute mark. To kind of conclude this was very concise. I hope you enjoyed it. But my point is, yeah, traditionally, as I said, Korea, great region, best region in the world. Do not associate Samsung Galaxy's success with Korean success. Because they've only been successful for a short period of time. If they were an SKT or even a KT roster, then yeah, I'd be all on board. I'd be like, okay, yep, we got to give them the benefit of the doubt. Because SKT's won Worlds 3 out of the last 4 years, and KT roster's a really good Korean team that, yeah, while they haven't really shown up on the, when they did go to Worlds, they made it into the knockout stage, obviously. They didn't go as deep, but they still put up a good showing. Samsung has been to Worlds 1 year out of the last 5 years, and they've gotten second one time, which is great. But until they start repeat performances of getting second, third, second, first one time maybe in the World Championship, I can't associate them with Korean success. Because before Worlds last year, they were a blip on everyone's radar. So that's my thing. And so I guess as an overall arching thing as a whole, any Korean team in the future, even if, God forbid, for some reason it's SKT in the future and they're playing terribly, or another Korean team comes up playing terribly, and you can apply this to LPL. I mean, I feel like we have applied this with LPL before. It's just LCK because if they're Korea, if another Korean team comes into Worlds or another international tournament looking poor, looking bad, if you don't have any contextual evidence to say that they're good, then shut up. Stop saying it's because they're Korean and they come from LCK, so we always have to expect them to do good. Because I don't believe that. I actually kind of believe that Western teams, if they were in another group, even with a Western team, I think that at least a game from one of the Western teams could be taken off of them, whether it's Cloud9, TSM, G2. Obviously couldn't do it this time. Not in the same way. I'm talking about other groups. But yeah, so Cloud9, TSM, Immortals. I think even GAM maybe could have taken a game off of them. If Fenerbahce almost took a game off of them, GAM could definitely take a game off of them. Fnatic maybe. Week 2 Fnatic, surely. So that's where my beef comes with SSG. So people, Samsung, my podcast mates say that I have a beef with Samsung. I have a hate boner against Samsung. It's not that. I just have a hatred and disdain for when people, just associate success with a region that you happen to play in. You happen to be there, and yes, you've been doing good, but that doesn't mean that given recent history, if you're looking at recent games played, that you should just be automatically assumed to be a successful team just because your region has been good for a long period of time doesn't mean that you're coming in as strong as everyone says. And like I said, to preface before I end this, I didn't say they weren't a top team in the world. I just said they are not a top 5 team and not a team that should be vying, that people should think could vie for a world championship run. Especially against Longzhou. If you have them possibly beating Longzhou or even taking Longzhou to 3-2, you're crazy. You are delusional. And so that's where I'll end this Perch rant right now, as even my camera's getting tired of me. It's about running out of battery. But if you've enjoyed this, like, comment, and subscribe. We're going to get the YouTube channel up soon, so hopefully this will be up as soon as I can do that. Remember, this is League Hour. This is hashtag Perch Rants. And if you want to give feedback, as long as it's not toxic, as long as you're not a toxin dog, and you don't come in, trying to blast hate and use racial slurs, just be toxic overall in general, and you bring valid, good points, I will conversate with you all day in the comment section about this point. I love talking to people about things. I love talking League of Legends. I aspire to be a coach or analyst one day, or a commentator, so it's kind of my job to want to talk about this stuff. So I will talk with you about this all day and night. So feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Hopefully I can bring you more good content. The next video will be about TSM's collapse in Group D, the parallels between them and the U.S. men's national team, and how we can possibly fix it in the coming future with franchising. This has been Cole Perch Gibson, and I hope you guys have a good afternoon, day, night. See you fudging later.